Hello and welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome. Today I want to talk about your interior design aesthetic, your approach to interior design, and how you can do that through identifying your interior design personality. I'm going to touch on maybe 5 or 6 personalities that will help you to kind of understand, I guess, your approach to design and how you can use that to your advantage moving forward, as opposed to just kind of like following trends and blindly designing your space just based on what you think your space should look like, as opposed to what you actually want for your space and how you want it to look. So that is today's video. Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has been sending in design advice requests. I've had a lot, so if I haven't gotten back to your email, please just give me time, I will. And it's just like I'm trying to balance it with work and then also all the emails I'm getting from you guys. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to send in your requests, and some of them have been very lengthy. I think just going forward, it would be really great that if you do send something in, just limit it to like 1 or 2 rooms, because I'm getting people sending in whole apartments, and if I'm being honest, I don't have the time to like sit down and do that. It would just take way too long. But I will get back to you at some point. And again, thank you. I've said that about 5 times, but it's been really, really nice seeing your spaces and kind of getting your perspectives and ideas about what you want to do to the space. And I'm really grateful that you want my help. With that being said, let's get into the video. I guess the first question that a lot of people would ask is like, why is it important to define your interior design style? I think for me personally, it's really important because when you are able to understand and define your interior design style, it gives you direction when you're designing your space, because ultimately you want your home to be a reflection of more than just your interior. It kind of gives context to the rest of your life, your experiences, your values, the things that you love, things that you want to have on display, you know, connection to family, friends, things that you find comforting, the colors that you like, and your approach to life in general. So I think, as I said, understanding your interior design style will really help you to get the most out of designing your space. The first interior design personality is the collector. So when I'm talking about the collector, think of Bridget Jones meets Lucy Williams. If you know who Lucy Williams is, she's an influencer but has a really beautiful eclectic home. So think of places that are really warm and cozy, inviting. They often have this sense of nostalgia about them, this sense of kind of a worn-in feel. That is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the collector. So I would be focusing on materials that are soft and warm and welcoming and familiar. You want to be leaning into the warmer tones, the colors that really evoke this sense of warmth and welcoming nature to them, and almost like a little bit of charm. Gentle kind of patterns and fabrics, particularly stripes, big kind of cozy, I guess, silhouettes and organic sort of shapes. There's not as much sort of like structure and alignment and streamlined pieces. It's all a little bit wonky, a little bit full of charm. There's just something, as I said, very nostalgic about this kind of space. I think in these kinds of spaces as well, leaning into that kind of secondhand antique furniture that has, you know, like really big, comfy, cozy armchairs that have like little cute ornate wheels on them, chunky furniture, kind of secondhand collectible items that you might get from flea markets or that were hand-me-downs or you inherited. There's definitely a sense of like patina to the materials in the space. So things, as I said, that have been worn in, that have been used. There's nothing necessarily super precious about the things, but you can tell that they've been loved. So that might be like worn in patinaed metals, antique lighting fixtures, a combination of wood tones. I think especially in these kinds of homes, you can definitely layer the different types of wood tones. It kind of creates this story and this sort of eclectic feel to the space. And then again, I think just like a combination of traditional and kind of natural materials. So there might be a lot of timber, as I said, like wicker baskets, twill, wool throws, just anything that really evokes that sense of warmth. Again, even though they're warm colors, it doesn't necessarily have to be just neutral tones. I think often the collector's home actually really leans into a sense of playfulness and color and being experimental. As I said, it's nothing too precious. It's really just like this bowerbird nest of kind of items that have been collected along the way and passed down, and just really has this great overall sense of charm. So if that sounds like you, if you're the collector, I would really focus on creating spaces that are layered, that feel warm, nostalgic, inviting, and that are really characterful. Basically just a home that really feels lived in and like there's been love there, and that it's got a story behind it. Okay, the second personality is the curator. This is more or less the opposite of the collector. It is definitely a much more refined approach to interior design. It's more of a kind of focus on like that quiet sense of luxury, and the overall sense of the space is considered and well thought out and designed down to the last detail. Curator, if that's you, is often quite sophisticated. They like luxurious kind of items. They like refined and elevated interiors. This approach is a really like highly curated way to design your space, make it feel considered, detail oriented, down to the last touch. I often find that with the curator, their space has a lot of sculptural pieces, organic forms, kind of bigger pieces that have more room around them to be really focused on, as opposed to the collector who has a lot of kind of items, maybe small knickknacks and things that create an overall kind of visually cluttered but like charming space. There's often in the curator space a lot of interesting finishes, whether that's like lime wash walls, interesting stones that have been used as opposed to just really simple stones. And there's like a really strong pull for the objects in the home to act as styling pieces. So when you walk into a space, you know it's going to be really curated, it's going to be really considered, and every piece has a place in that space. There's often an incorporation of natural materials and also some man-made. Like you might have some really nice, beautiful tufted wool rugs, some stone tables, linen, cotton bedding, and often a really interesting and intriguing collection of art, and that's across multiple mediums. So there's also definitely a focus on the handmade and the artisanal pieces, the craftsmanship, as well as like vintage and one-of-a-kind pieces. The curator really wants their space to feel like an experience when someone enters into it. It's not just like willy-nilly, this goes here, that goes there. It's really thought through. Every detail is considered down to the kitchen soap. So if that sounds like you, I would definitely focus on creating spaces that feel sophisticated, that feel considered, thinking about all the objects that are in your space and where they go, and giving them intention as opposed to just having something for the sake of it. That is really kind of the ultimate goal of the curator's space, is to make it feel somewhat like a gallery, so that everything that you come across, everything that you look at, you know is there for a reason. The third personality is the naturalist. Maybe drawn to things like natural materials or embracing nature in your space, whether that's through real life nature, so like flowers, plants, foliage, or through a motif, through something like a wallpaper or artworks, or somehow incorporated into a print on your textiles. You really value nature and the outside world, and you don't want your home to feel like a space that's cut off from nature, but rather is integrated in this kind of like symbiosis where it's one thing, where you're really embracing all those elements of nature, as opposed to having just like a stark kind of living environment that doesn't really incorporate that. So you tend to use colors, textures, materials, things that really reflect the outside world. Might be more earthy, kind of organic tones, textures, woven elements, less sterile, man-made finishes. It's really an emphasis on natural materials, so stone, wood, metals, leather, wool, anything that's from the earth. You really try to incorporate that into your space. Finally, you'll have an incorporation of furniture that has natural elements integrated, so whether that's timber furniture, natural metal finishes, as I said, leather kind of woven details, textiles on the wall, textiles on your couch, on your bed. Basically, it's just non-man-made materiality. If you're the naturalist, then these are the things that I would really focus on when you're designing your space, and lean into that side of you that loves those things, because that's ultimately going to create a really interesting space that reflects your love for nature, your connection to nature. And again, it doesn't have to be really literal. You can still integrate this in other ways. Like if you're wanting to use, as I said, a really interesting wallpaper or a grass cloth that is like a natural fiber that has that texture to it and it's a little bit wonky and organic, if that is what you are drawn to, then I would definitely encourage you to incorporate those elements into your space. The fourth personality is the wanderer. So when I'm talking about this personality, I'm talking about someone who loves to have items in their space that they've collected on their travels. They really celebrate different cultures and geographic kind of points of interest through their objects in their homes, through the way they design their spaces, and combine various influences within their space. So if that sounds like you, your space is often quite curious. It's really got a sense of collectiveness to it, and it can often feel quite artistic. It often consists of handmade artisan elements, items, as I said, that celebrate an array of cultures, whether that is your own culture or other cultures that you've experienced and really connected to, pieces collected during your travels and handed down from a family member that was maybe from another time period. So you're really interested in history, in culture, and having those elements on display in your home to really reflect that sense of richness. You can find really interesting pieces at your local flea market. If you go traveling, there's always so many great places to find stuff, whether that's like in Japan, they have I think it's the Odeya flea market, which is like one of the biggest ones in Tokyo, and they have all these beautiful collectible vintage pieces that are really driven towards artisan culture and the practice of the handmade sort of elements, which Japan is obviously known for. But any country you go to, you'll be able to find pieces that really reflect their culture. Artworks that you have in your home will often be a reflection of different cultures. Maybe that's indigenous art, or again, traditional artworks that you found overseas or locally. Antique pieces such as mirrors, lighting fixtures. Really, there's going to be probably more antique and vintage pieces than new pieces. And then also like a large selection of books that really focus on different kind of segments of the world. So travel, art, cultural elements, interiors, architecture, weaving processes. Like there's so much, ceramics. There's so many books out there that will really help you to achieve this aesthetic. And again, similarly to the collector, the Wanderer's space is kind of like a bowerbird's nest of collectible items. It's quite maximalist. I would say it's definitely not a minimalist approach. And there's often reference to a lot of different cultural motifs. That might be through rugs, like Persian rugs or Moroccan rugs. There's always that kind of element of cultural reference. So to sum it up, the Wanderer's home, if that's you, is often like a collective library of items that they've collected on their travels, or pieces that they've collected over their lifespan that really celebrate different cultures and the different artisanal practice and history of the world. Okay, next one is the minimalist, which I think a lot of people probably relate to. I understand why a lot of people like to have minimal spaces that don't really lean into clutter, but more so are just functional. So if that's you, that sounds like you, the minimalist works off this idea of less is more. You appreciate really refined, sleek, minimal, sophisticated interiors. And similarly to the curator, you have a very curated and considered home, and that is the approach you take when you're designing your interiors. You like to have fewer items in your home. You're often quite organized. You don't like clutter. You don't like the visual chaos of having too many pieces in your space, and you really like to give each piece in your space its own kind of area so that it can be appreciated, as opposed to getting lost in the clutter of a million pieces. Minimalist is often drawn to quite neutral, harmonious tones. You want your space to often feel quite calm and zen, so to speak. You don't like to have a visual clash of a lot of colors and textures and patterns going on, but you do like the use of high-end materials. So I think it's really important in these spaces, because they are quite pared back, is to use a lot of layers, whether that's tonal layering, whether that's textural layering through rugs and things, and they can still be neutral, but it's giving that element of texture and layer, as opposed to just having quite a bare, sterile space. So as I said, the minimalist home is often like it acts as sort of like a backdrop that's then punctuated by these really interesting pieces that have been curated and collected for the space, so that they don't kind of blend into the background, but they rather become sort of like a focal point when someone's experiencing the space. Often leans into quite a modern approach to furniture and things, but with that being said, there's always the exception. There's always people that like to have modern and old pieces of furniture, antique and vintage collectible items, and mix that in with modern pieces. But I generally find that with the minimal approach, a lot of the furniture is quite sleek, streamlined, less kind of whimsical in shape, I suppose. It's often sculptural lighting, and as I said, standalone pieces. And I find a lot of the time that the minimalist cuts out kind of unnecessary fixtures and fittings. Hardware like handles on cabinets and things is often quite an integrated space where things are not included that aren't deemed as kind of necessary. Spaces are often really clean and organized, and that's just like the atypical personality of someone who loves a minimalist space. And the last personality that I'm going to talk about is the bohemian / artistic personality, which is again complete opposite to the minimalist. This is someone who loves a space that is really eclectic, colorful, vibrant, relaxed, warm, inviting, all the things that we love a space to be. Their design style and interior approach often gravitates towards kind of textural, soulful, layered, and kind of colorful, eclectic spaces, as I said. So the bohemian kind of artistic person has a home that focuses less on definition and more on kind of a collection of styles. Their home is kind of experimental in feeling, it's eye-catching, and it's often quite relaxed. Consists of a lot of natural motifs and kind of hard to find unique one-of-a-kind pieces. Nothing is kind of too precious in this space. It's really just an experiment with color and homewares and things that have been collected along the way. They tend to incorporate mixed materials such as different timber tones, mixed metals, patterns and textiles, and often incorporate natural materials that have a real handmade feel to them. So things like rattan, cane, wicker, grass cloth, leather, it really does focus again on those kind of natural elements. Their art and accessories often celebrate color, pattern, abstract details, and texture. And the Bohemian space doesn't really rely on order. It's really more of a free-flowing kind of approach to interior design. Overall, their space is colorful, light, eclectic, warm, and a bit of a mishmash of items, which personally I really love that style. I think it can be really interesting and fun to be in a space like that. But I know that that is also some people's worst nightmare. So if that is sounding like you, I would definitely lean into the color. I think with all of these things, I would say just lean into what you're naturally drawn to. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Don't worry about what the trends are. You have to live in the space, and you may as well lean into the things that you love if you want to get the most out of your space. If you want to really enjoy being in the space, there's no point designing a space and living in it when you don't love it. Like, it's such a waste of time and energy. You may as well have things that really reflect who you are, and don't judge yourself for that. Just if you like something, just run with it, and that will honestly give you the best outcome. So I hope that some of you have resonated with this video and with those design personalities, and maybe gives you a little bit more insight into how to approach your interior design aesthetic and style when mixing up your space. But that is all I have for today's video. My God, I feel like I am trying to chase my tail at the moment. I have so much on in terms of like just trying to keep up with work, with interior design projects, and then also trying to get more than one video out a week. But I think once this dies down a little bit, I will get into it a little bit more, because there are other videos I've got lined up, like fashion videos that I also want to put out. But as I said, my time is feeling a bit limited. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, because I do upload interiors videos every Sunday, and then other videos throughout the week, like vlogs and fashion videos. As I said, when I have more time, I will be getting on top of that a little bit more. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.